got the opposite view, who really thinks that the government belongs in a series of sort of personal areas that I really don't think are predominantly the area of government, and I've got the opposite view, that I really think government in a limited role can do a lot of good for the world.
Right.
And I think we saw that many years ago working together in our school system. I think there's a lot of improvements and progress we can make in education together that lays the foundation for our next generation here in Delaware.
Let me ask you this real quickly, Shauna. Did you want to go?
No, go ahead.
You sure?
Yes.
All right. I know that values and jobs are very important to you. And I know for a fact, I've heard you preach, so I know that you're a person of faith. I mean, you get me happy. I heard it, I said, wait a minute. And so, but the other piece that I know is important to you is education, and we want to cover both things. We want to talk about how you feel about job creation and you know, stimulating economies. But say, for instance, a person such as Mr. Pritchett, locally, you've worked with him, you know, and his organization, I'm going to tell you, is top-notch, Pritchett Associates. Will you be able to facilitate that in terms of organizations such as Mr. Pritchett, whose his expertise is needed? You know,
he's got, I know, exactly the sort of skills, background, and experience that our young people need and need to hear from.
Right.
One of the proposals I've made is to expand some tax credits, and I'll speak to this briefly. One of them is the so-called home office credit. So if you're trying to start a business in your own home, so that you've got a chance at another future. Let's say the job you're in is just not paying you enough, or you're working too hard, or you've been laid off and you're trying to start a new business. I think we ought to increase the home office exemption for taxes. So you've got a tax incentive to start a new business if you're a startup entrepreneur. Second, I think there is, what our tax code does now is if Maurice and Juanita take their savings and they start a small business, Maurice Pritchett Associates, and 3 years later it's unsuccessful, under today's tax law, you can write that off. Right? If the business goes under, you can write off, let's say it's $30,000 you lose starting and the business closes. Today you can write that off. That's backwards. We ought to do the reverse. We ought to give you the incentive to start it, not when it folds. Because 3/4 of the jobs that are created in our country, more than that, are started by small businesses. Businesses that are new, that are startups, that are growing. And so the home office exemption and entrepreneurial startup investment exemption are two things I've talked about for months in this campaign. The others are getting us back to the words made in America, manufactured in Delaware, meaning something. A research and development tax credit tied to a manufacturing credit, so that if DuPont invents something and they make it here, we double down on that. We give them an extra incentive. I think these are the sorts of things federally we can be doing to start and help small business and to help larger business, those that are science-based businesses, those that are inventing things, whether it's cars or it's new plastics, whether it's folks who are starting a business in our own community that's going to help young people and get them back to work. And I'm eager to be helpful specifically both to Pritchett Associates and to other startups in our community. I had an amazing conversation with a man yesterday who'd been a long time, he was in the home building business. He'd been very successful, but he was in a terrible accident and he was disabled and unable to work for most of 2 years. And his wife, while they were sort of working through that whole process, sat down with him and said, it's time to start a new company. So he started a small coffee roasting company that's working in Newport, and he's got his own little coffee roasting business, and he's trying to sell it downtown to companies. He's trying to sell it out of his own little store. And I had a long conversation with him about how did you get financing? How did you get the idea? How many people do you employ? How are you going to grow it? We need someone fighting for us in the Senate that's passionate about this, that cares about it, that wants to work with someone like Mr. Pritchett, that wants to work with our small businesses, and that wants to fight to help us figure out how to grow them for the long term.
Well, one of the things that I'm impressed with is that I don't just see you around election time, around campaign time, and I'm very serious about that. You know, I see him at places where I'm like, oh, Channel 28 is going to be the only one here. Oh, there's Chris Coons. Okay, you know.
I was at a nylon event where they were making nylon celebrating the 75th anniversary.
But it's important because right now, as you and I were discussing earlier, we have a lot of attention nationally. But once that's over and the national media is gone, I would like to know that someone is still working on behalf of Delaware.
Someone who's from here, connected here.
I love this state, I really do, and it's important to me that the things that we care about are represented in a way that's going to be heard. So we want to let you say anything else or get anything else across that you'd like to right now. I
just want to say thank you to Mr. Pritchett.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'm just happy to be with you. You've been a big inspiration for all of Delaware, and the youth have benefited greatly by your commitment with your family. And I just think that's been something that stuck with me. No matter where I see you, you're always out there fighting for the downtrodden, and that's so impressive to me. You know, the coats and so forth that you used to give to our students when they were down.
This is the kind of man where he says, he'd call me up and he'd say, now I've got this young man here. I can tell from when he got off the bus, from the way he was, and I pulled him in and I said, no, don't you have a coat this winter? And he'd call me up and say, can you help me with a coat? Can you help me with a coat? Can you help me? But that's who you are. You care about the child individually in a way that allowed them to have their dignity. Weren't you doing? You were always doing laundry. You had a
I had a washing machine.
I mean, right? I mean, if you have a kid who's in such hard circumstances at home, for whatever reason, they're coming to school in dirty clothes. You get kids who act up because of that. And you would see that, you understood that, and you knew that sometimes something that simple, making sure a child has clean clothes, has a decent breakfast, has a winter coat, that's what they need to learn. That's impressive to me.
Oh, thank you.
That's always challenged and inspired me, that you were that committed to kids. That's huge.
I've seen
that's very kind of you.
You know, if they needed a toothbrush, whatever, and he's still doing the same thing.